Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Mel Kessler. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Director of Transformation here at the Department of Community and Economic Development, and it's my pleasure to be moderating today's webinar to discuss the COVID-19 ARPA H2O PA and COVID-19 ARPA PA small water and sewer programs. While many of you may be familiar with these programs from past rounds, there are a number of changes we want to make sure that you understand as this round is being funded with the federal dollars. Today, we're going to be hearing from two members of our Site Development Office. The Site Development Office administers multiple programs aimed at improving infrastructure, developing community improvement projects, and enhancing commercial and industrial centers across the Commonwealth. Economic Development Analyst Stephen Schlater will be going through the program highlights, and then Program Director Greg Welker will walk you through a step-by-step guide for obtaining some of the new required information for application. Please feel free to put the questions you have into chat throughout the presentation. We're going to address the questions together once the presentations are complete. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and that by participating in this discussion, you are consenting to the recording, storage, and distribution of this meeting by a government agency. On that note, we will be posting this recording on our website in a few days. So if there are no objections to the recording, I'm going to turn things over to Stephen. Stephen?
All right, thank you. All right, 1 second here. Sorry, I want to share this PowerPoint. So we'll be discussing, as Mel said, the COVID-19 ARPA PA small water and sewer and H2O PA programs. Going to hop into this real quickly here. All right. So again, these programs are very similar to the ones that you've previously applied for. However, because these funds are coming from federal sources, the federal ARPA funds, there are some key differences to note. So to begin with, the eligible applicants for these programs. So municipalities and municipal authorities that own and maintain a public water supply, sanitary sewer, or stormwater system are eligible within the PA small water and sewer program. For eligible projects within the PA small water and sewer program, projects must have a minimum total project cost of $30,000. And then the maximum grant amount that is allowed within this program is $500,000. So anything above the $500,000 is fine for total project costs, but for the actual grant itself, it needs to be $500,000. Allowable projects are water supply systems, so those that are publicly owned and maintained infrastructure relative to the delivery of potable water service. Sanitary sewer systems, which are publicly owned and maintained infrastructure relative to the transportation and treatment of sanitary sewer waste. And then stormwater systems, publicly owned and maintained infrastructure relative to the safe transport of stormwater away from public and private properties to prevent localized flooding during severe weather events. And then unique to this ARPA-funded program as opposed to the previous program is that this does also include the green stormwater infrastructure. So things such as detention basins, bioswales, and rain gardens. And then also flood control projects are not eligible within the ARPA PA small water and sewer program. Additionally, there is a match requirement for these programs, which is 15% from any other source. So for example, if you have a total project cost of $100,000, $85,000 of that can be grant funds, and then the remaining $15,000 would need to come from a source of match funds. Additionally, whenever you apply for these programs, you need to be applying for one type of system. So you need to be applying for just the water supply system or just the sanitary sewer system. You can't apply for both within the same application. However, you can submit two separate applications for one system. However, if you are consolidating or regionalizing two or more of a water supply system or sanitary sewer system that are managed and operated as an integrated system, that is permitted. You just need to be able to explain how those systems are integrated. And then additionally, regarding the match requirement as well, pending applications cannot be used as match. So if you've applied for both the PA small water and sewer and the H2O PA programs, you can't use one application as match for the other. For eligible project costs, construction costs are eligible under this program. And then for the contingencies, you're allowed to have 5% of contingencies for construction costs. There's not any other contingencies allowed for the other types of project costs, only for construction. Acquisition of property, right-of-ways, or easements is also allowed under this program for an eligible project. Fixed equipment, and then the installation of security measures at a facility are also eligible. So something such as a security fence or security cameras at a treatment facility, that type of cost would be eligible. And then additionally, engineering and design are eligible, but limited to 10% of the grant, but they can be anything in excess of that can be used as match. So if you have a grant amount of $200,000, $20,000 of that can go towards engineering out of the grant funds specifically. If you have costs that are above that $20,000, only $20,000 can come from the grant, but then the remaining amount can be used towards your match requirement. Inspection costs are for those relative to the inspection of construction of an eligible project. Any sort of construction observation, management, oversight, those are considered engineering costs and will be subject to that 10% limit if they're coming out of the grant. Permitting costs are also eligible, and then also administrative costs are eligible, but they're limited to 2% of the grant, and those costs cannot be used as match. So again, if you have a grant of $200,000, you can have admin of up to $4,000 as allowable from the grant. Then moving to the COVID-19 ARPA H2O PA program, a lot of this will be very similar. Municipalities and municipal authorities are eligible to apply that own and maintain a public water supply, sanitary sewer, or stormwater system. For the projects, eligible projects are those that are above $500,000 of total project costs, and then a water supply system, so publicly owned and maintained infrastructure relative to the delivery of potable water service, sanitary sewer system, publicly owned and maintained infrastructure relative to the transportation and treatment of sanitary sewer waste, and then stormwater systems, publicly owned and maintained infrastructure relative to the safe transport of stormwater away from public and private properties to prevent localized flooding during severe weather events. And again, similar to the PA small water and sewer, green stormwater infrastructure is eligible under this program. So things such as detention basins, bioswales, rain gardens. And then also for this, flood control projects are not eligible. Additionally, if you are going to be consolidating or regionalizing two or more water supply or sanitary sewer systems, they need to be managed and operated as an integrated system, and we'll need to see how those systems are integrated. The match requirement for this program is 50% of the awarded grant. Another way to think of it is a third of the total project cost. So if your total project cost is $3 million, $2 million of that would be grant funds, $1 million of that would be match. And again, pending applications cannot be used as match for this program. Eligible costs for this program are construction costs, and again, the contingencies are limited to 5% of eligible construction costs. Acquisition of property, right-of-ways, and easements are also eligible for the construction of a project that's eligible. Fixed equipment, as well as installation of security measures at an eligible facility is also allowable. Engineering and design are also capped at 10% of the grant amount, but anything in excess of that can be used as match. So if you have a $2 million project, then 10% of that, the $200,000, could be used for engineering costs out of the grant. Anything in excess of that could be used as match. And sorry, that's if you receive a $2 million grant. Inspection costs are also eligible, but can only be for those for construction. Any sort of construction observation, management, and oversight are considered engineering costs. Permitting is also eligible, and then administrative costs, again, are capped at 2% of the grant and cannot be used as match. So if you do receive grant funds, the way that you would access funds is through reimbursement. So these programs are reimbursement based. Your costs must be incurred, and then you submit invoices for reimbursement along with a payment request form. So the submitted invoices will be reimbursed at the percentage set by the guidelines. So again, for the PA small water and sewer, there's a 15% match requirement. So those invoices will be reimbursed at 85%. And then for H2O PA, 2/3 of those invoices will be reimbursed. Excuse me. In addition to the invoices, grantees will also be required to submit documentation to certify compliance with federal procurement, public advertisement, and bid tabulations as part of that, as well as contracts with the vendors. More details will also be provided to grantees when they receive a copy of the executed grant contract. So whenever we send over the executed contract, you'll receive a list of the other items required. So this is a very important section to note, especially for those of you that have previously applied for the H2O PA or PA small water and sewer programs. Presently, the window to apply is open. So we started receiving and accepting applications October 1st, and the deadline to apply is then December 21st. So you have about a month and a half remaining to apply for these programs. The cost for this programs must be incurred by September 30th, 2026. So this is also a very important thing to note, is that for some of our other programs, if you are completing a project and things have not quite concluded yet, we have oftentimes allowed for grant extensions that are 1 year at a time. So you apply for an extension, and then you can keep extending those. However, it's very important to note that because these are federal funds, there's no extensions permitted. So the deadline to disperse funds is December 31st, 2026, and anything not dispersed by that date will be returned to the U.S. Treasury. So that is why we're asking for costs to be incurred by September 30th, 2026. You should note that whenever you're planning out your projects and setting up project timelines. So if you incur those costs, you then want to submit reimbursement request shortly thereafter to make sure we don't run into any problems where you're nearing that December 31st deadline, and we want to make sure those funds get out before that. The other thing to note is expenditure categories. This again is a change because of the federal funding, and it's very important to understand that each project must align to a single expenditure category. So you can't submit for different infrastructure types, as I noted previously. So if you have an application, you can submit for a water system or a sanitary sewer system or stormwater system, but within one application, you can't submit to multiple expenditure categories. You can submit different applications for different expenditure categories, but there needs to be one category per application. As an example of these expenditure categories, these are located in the appendices of the guidelines. But so one of the categories is centralized wastewater treatment. So that is for like the improvement of a treatment facility. Another one is centralized wastewater collection and conveyance. So that's improvements to the collection and conveyance within a sanitary sewer line. So even though those systems are kind of interconnected in a way, because the treatment facility is its own expenditure category, and then the sanitary sewer line is its own expenditure category, you can't submit for both of those. You need to submit for one or the other. And whenever you submit your application, you will indicate what expenditure category you are submitting under. Additionally, you must also get a UEI, which is a unique entity identifier. And so this is a number that is provided by the federal government. And so if you've previously received a DUNS number, or if you've applied for federal funding previously, you should have a DUNS number. These numbers have been converted over to a UEI. So you should log into your sam.gov profile to see if your number has been turned to the UEI and what that number is. If you have not previously received federal funding, then you'll want to make sure you register. And again, you can do that at sam.gov. And whenever you are applying, you'll need to provide that number. And we want applicants to register for that UEI before you apply, because you'll need that number prior to contracting if you are awarded funds. So there are some additional reporting requirements due to this being federal funding. So if you do receive funds, you'll be required to provide quarterly reports for the duration of your project. There's a template provided that has been formatted to require the least amount of reporting after the first submission. So the first time you submit, there's going to be a lot of details you need to fill out within the form, but then all of these subsequent reports is just going to be modifying small pieces of information. And again, that will be a quarterly report that you'll have to submit. Prevailing wage rates do apply for these programs. So you'll need to get the prevailing wage rate determination from Pennsylvania's Department of Labor and Industry's website. The federal Davis-Bacon rates are waived. However, if your project is also receiving federal funding, then you need to make sure that the source of those other funds don't require it. But in either instance, you are still required to get the Pennsylvania determination for the prevailing wage rates. You can apply for these programs at our DCED website at the link provided. And then at the time of submission, you'll need to pay the $100 application fee. If there's any additional questions, we'll obviously take some questions at the end of this presentation, but even after that, you can contact Greg Welker or myself, or contact the Center for Business Financing. At this time, Greg will talk about some additional requirements and some resources for these programs.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you walking through the programs and some of the changes that we have due to the source of funds. So as both Stephen and Mel mentioned, I'm going to walk through some of the resources that we have available on our website that are available for anyone that seeks them out to help in submitting your application. So I'm first going to start here on our homepage, which is dced.pa.gov. I'm going to show you two ways to get to our program pages for those of you that aren't aware. Probably the quickest and easiest is if you know that this is a program that's administered by the Commonwealth Financing Authority. Under our programs and funding ribbon, you'll see a link to the Commonwealth Financing Authority homepage. This is where you can find a majority of the programs that are administered by the CFA. And you'll note that the COVID-19 ARPA H2O PA program and the COVID-19 ARPA PA Small Water and Sewer program are both listed here. If you forget that this is a program that is administered by the CFA, if you search water or sewer or water and sewer, the first two results you're going to get in that search result are the H2O PA and small water and sewer programs. So I'm going to walk through some of the resources that we have directly on the page. We have a link to our guidelines. So this is where you will find a majority of the information that you need in order to determine the eligibility of your project, what requirements are, or what are the required information and documentation that you're going to need to submit. We have links to the tables through the census's website to obtain the median household income and lowest quintile income. We also have a link back to the page where you can access the FFATA form and the rest of our resources that we have available. So at the bottom of this page, we have a couple of things that are available. We have our frequently asked questions, and I'm just going to hit on a few of them because I know there were some questions that came in. So who is eligible to apply? That's the big one that we get. Can I submit one application for multiple projects? We have a couple of examples here. I know Stephen hit on a few of these. And actually, we got a question on the second example, which is, can a municipality or a municipal authority submit an application for a pump station and upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility? And the answer to that is, with the pump station being part of the collection and conveyance system, that's expenditure category 5.2. Wastewater treatment facility improvements are expenditure category 5.1, so they would need to be separate applications. We're accepting applications through December 21st. The one that I always like to highlight with H2O PA is the match requirement. In our guidelines, the match is stated as the applicant shall provide not less than 50% of the amount awarded under the H2O PA program. I will say we get a lot of questions from folks asking if it's 50% or a third, and that this FAQ page has prompted a lot of those questions. I will just reiterate what Stephen highlighted in his portion of the presentation, and that is, it is a 2-to-1 match to, or 2-to-1 grant to matching funds ratio. So for every $2 of grant funds, the applicant is required to commit at least $1 of matching funds. We are setting a deadline for the incurment of costs and project completion of September 30th of 2026. And as Stephen mentioned, that is because we have a hard deadline currently at the end of 2026, whereby if the funds have not been paid out to our grantees, they're returned to the U.S. Treasury, and a grantee no longer has the ability to seek reimbursement of those funds. Back to the program page, just a couple other things. We do have a reporting template. This is a downloadable spreadsheet. It's just to give you an idea of the information that we are going to be asking you to provide on a quarterly basis. Most of this information is going to be collected on that initial report. The grantee information is not going to change. The project information is not going to change, save for the project status as your project moves forward. The period of performance start date, we'll have that updated to the date of awards. And I know a few people were asking that in the chat. Earliest we anticipate awards would be July, but that could change depending on the volume of applications, or knock on wood, any other number of reasons that would push our reviews beyond July. So if we cannot make July, our next attempt would be to make it to the September CFA board meeting. Most likely on a quarterly basis, you're just going to be updating the expenditure information, and we'll work with you. We'll have some more detailed instructions when we get to the contracting phase. This is more just a template to provide you with an idea of the type of information that we're going to be requesting. The FFATA form is going to be a required upload. I wanted to highlight this for a number of reasons. Number one, the DCED contract number field. That is something that we will add if your application is awarded funding. We will add that contract number on the back end. For the compensation of officers, I believe all of our eligible applicants are required to publicly disclose salaries for employees and executives. Read carefully through these just to double check in the event that you're not subject to disclosing that information. If these criteria do apply to you, you will need to provide that information. Most likely, you're going to end up just checking this box indicating that you do not meet the conditions for reporting highly compensated individuals on this form. I also wanted to walk through, for those of you that want to follow along, I have an example to obtaining the median household income and lowest quintile of income. So if you are following along, clicking through the program pages, I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to walk through the actual table itself. And I just need to get my sharing bar out of the way. So I apologize. Okay, there we go. So if you click on this link, it will take you to this table titled Income in the Past 12 Months in 2020 Inflation Adjusted Dollars. If I look further down in that table, I can see right here is the median household income. In order to find the information for your community, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select geos, and we are going to scroll down under all geographies to the county subdivision option. This allows you to pare down to the local level, the municipal level. So I'm selecting Pennsylvania as my state. Since our offices are located in the city of Harrisburg, I'm just going to use that as my example here. Mel, are people having issues seeing the screen? I'm seeing a couple chats come up.
One person said that they weren't seeing it. Run your mouse over where you're. Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay.
I can see where you're at right now. It looks like most people see it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going through this.
Yeah, it looks like there's one person that's having an issue. It might just be a loading problem. You can always watch the video afterwards.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. So if you go to those program pages at some point early in the week next week, we do hope to have the recording of the webinar posted to both program pages. So City of Harrisburg, again, using that as our example, of course in Dauphin County, and I select Harrisburg City. I'm going to go ahead and close this screen, and I can see that now Harrisburg City is my focal point, and the median income for the city is $41,831. If you were to scroll down to obtain the lowest quintile of income, same thing. If you click this link, it's going to bring up another table called the mean household income of quintiles. And what we're looking for specifically here is this field, the lowest quintile of income. So we're doing the same exact moves. We're going to geo, scrolling down to county subdivision, selecting Pennsylvania as our state. I'm going to continue using Harrisburg as my example. So I'm selecting Dauphin County and Harrisburg City. Once I close that, I can see that the lowest quintile of income for the city is $8,204. We are collecting this information because it is a requirement for the use of ARPA funds for water and sewer infrastructure. It does not impact the eligibility of your application. There's no income threshold that disqualifies anyone from applying.
Greg, can I add though, if they don't supply that, that would affect their eligibility, correct?
Correct. When I get into the next tab that I have open, which is the actual application, I'm just going to walk through a couple things on the addenda page. You'll see that it is a required field in order to submit your application. So if you don't have this information, you cannot apply. One thing I wanted to mention, and I'm going to pick on Laurel Mountain Borough out in Westmoreland County because that is who brought this issue to our attention. For your mean household income of quintiles, if you have a population of 200 individuals or less, you may not be able to find this information. So if I go back out doing the same steps and we're going to Westmoreland County, if I scroll through this list, I don't see an option for Laurel Mountain Borough. So that is going to impact those communities where the project is located in a municipality that has a population of 200 or less. In that instance, we are going to ask you to supply the county level information. So in that example with Laurel Mountain Borough, we're just asking them to provide the information for Westmoreland County. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight with this is in the instructions, when you are selecting the box for the municipality to be served by the project, if you have a project that is going to serve multiple municipalities or is located in several municipalities, we are asking you to use your best judgment in selecting the municipality where the project is predominantly located. So if you have a project where 60% of a project is in the township and 40% is in the borough, we ask that you use the information for the township. That's just an example. Obviously, it's going to be different for each project, but we're just asking for you to use your best judgment. As Stephen mentioned in his portion, we are going to have you select the expenditure category. We have a list of them here. It's just selected from a drop-down box. We have a full table of the expenditure categories listed in the guidelines. If you have questions about whether a project fits into one category or another, we are happy to assist in that. If you just reach out to the site development office, contact information was provided at the end of Stephen's slide. We also have general contact information on page 6 of the guidelines. As I mentioned, we are going to be looking for that median household income to be input here, as well as the lowest quintile of income of the service area should be for the same municipality. We will be checking that just to make sure everything lines up. So if you have questions on getting that information or aren't quite sure, reach out to us. We're happy to assist. One of the other changes we made this year is, as far as the ownership of the system, we're just asking applicants to self-certify that the project is going to be owned and maintained by an eligible applicant. So that is a project that is 100% owned and maintained by a municipality or a municipal authority. If there's any question about whether or not that project is going to be owned and maintained by the applicant, please reach out to us. We are happy to assist in making that determination. We also have a worker protection form. It's a downloadable form. If you select it, it opens as a PDF. You can fill this out, save it to your desktop or a designated folder, and upload that form here. Those of you who have applied to our programs in the past, we do have the $100 application fee. So once you complete your application and you go to the certification page, you will be redirected to a third-party vendor's website where you can pay that fee by credit card, debit card, or electronic check. I always want to point out that once that payment goes through, you will have to go back to the application to complete the final certification and submission. So if you have issues with that payment, please reach out to our customer service center. And that concludes the resource portion of the presentation. So Mel, questions? What do we got?
I have some questions for you. One of the favorite questions is, and I know that the recording is going to be available, but are the slides themselves going to be available? It looks like some people just would like the slides.
Yeah, if there is a good number of requests for slides, I think we can certainly send those out. If we can get a list of the emails of the folks that registered. Oh, okay. Ashley said we can post them on the program page.
Wonderful. And Ashley, could you repost the contact information since that's on there? So one of the questions was about engineering. The 10% engineering cap, does that include construction inspection items, or is that a separate item?
So you'll note in the guidelines that we actually have two separate lines for engineering and inspection costs. So that 10% engineering cap is your value engineering, your design that goes into the final preparations for putting that project out to bid, or any engineering that needs to occur as a result of unforeseen circumstances.
Okay. Are permits considered administrative costs?
Permits are not considered administrative costs. It is a separate cost. They are reimbursable under the grant. They can certainly be used out of the source of matching funds as well, so long as those costs are incurred after awards have been made.
Wonderful. Can municipalities use the monies for culvert replacements carrying roadways over a stream? And if that's a question that someone needs to reach out directly and have a conversation with you, that's an acceptable answer.
So as far as culvert replacement, I will say generally speaking, no, because that can be viewed as a flood control project, which the federal ARPA guidance has come out and said that is not an eligible use of funds. We do have a separate program, our flood mitigation program, which we administer using funds from the Marcellus Legacy Fund. And that application period opens on an annual basis. We accept applications from February 1st through May 31st and typically make awards in September.
Wonderful. And if someone wants additional information on flood mitigation, they can reach out to?
They can reach out to the site development office. If they go to the CFA program page, we have a full set of guidelines under the Act 13 programs.
Is it permissible for a private developer to pursue grant monies for public water or sewer extension within a municipality as the applicant?
That may be a separate conversation because I don't know that it's quite clear who's going to own and maintain that infrastructure. We have had instances in the past where developer and a municipality have partnered to complete a project, but that the system was ultimately owned and maintained by the municipality.
Okay.
So if that's something we need to have a conversation on, whoever asked that question, by all means, please reach out.
We'd love to have a conversation is one of my favorite answers that Greg likes to give. Would a phased project, one piece of a phased project, be an acceptable candidate for this grant, for these grants? So could they use a phase of a project instead of the whole project?
Yes. It's a little more complicated in that with a phased project, that construction and or contracting should not begin prior to awards. And as I mentioned earlier, we're targeting July at the earliest. So if you have a project where this is your approach and you're looking to start construction or contracting those earlier phases and going to be contracting the phase that you're seeking funding for with the other phases, please reach out. We'd like to have a conversation to make sure that we can get that project set up so that it's going to be eligible for funding.
Is there a list of previously successful projects that people can look at to see what sort of things have been approved in the past?
Sure. So this is a newer program in that there are some federal requirements tied to it. But as Stephen highlighted in his presentation, we are basing this off of previously administered programs, the PA Small Water and Sewer Program and H2O PA program. A list of the awards for all CFA programs can be found on that CFA program page. In the left box, you'll see a link for approved projects. That'll take you to our approved project library, where we have lists that are sorted by program.
And Ashley dropped that link in chat. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
And Terry asked, and I'm asking Terry because I'm not 100% sure what the acronym stands for. Wanted to know if ads for ISB's administrative costs are included. Invitation for bids. Okay, so costs for bidding, can that be included in admin?
Yes, bidding is part of the admin cap.
Can a municipality submit multiple applications? The projects may be similar but separated.
There is no limit to the number of applications any one municipality or municipal authority can submit. The limitation is just for the programmatic requirements in terms of what we can provide in funding, and to the extent that those projects are separate by expenditure category.
Okay. So you had mentioned earlier that you're looking to make award announcements hopefully in July. We all know that that might be a little bit later depending upon the number of applications received. Are expenditures prior to the award date eligible for reimbursement?
Any costs that are incurred prior to approval are not eligible for reimbursement. And they cannot be used as match either.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Thank you. Someone did ask about availability of this presentation. I'll just say again that it is going to be posted on our website sometime in the next week or so. I have a very long question I'm trying to read. How far along can the project be prior to application or prior to award? Like planning, design, bids received? Is there a cutoff? What do we need to, where can it be in order to apply?
So as far as the floor, we just want to make sure that there's at least enough preliminary engineering that's been done so that we can identify what a project is and how much that might cost. As far as how far along it can be, ideally, we would like for no contracts to be executed prior to approval. If you have a situation where that is not feasible, please reach out to us, because we want to have that conversation again to see what options might be on the table to help keep that project eligible.
Because of course there's language that probably needs to be in those contracts from the CFA grants.
Yeah.
Are grants eligible for CCTV inspection and sewer lining projects? Are those considered acceptable fund costs?
Yeah, if that's all part of the same project. So we would not be able to do just an inspection of lines, as that would be deemed to be a planning project, or preliminary construction or preliminary to construction project. And we're only looking to fund projects that construct, rehab, or otherwise improve water supply, sanitary sewer, and stormwater systems.
What sort of proof of matching funds is required at the time of application? Do you need me to rephrase that one?
No. So it depends on the source. If you have a previously awarded grant, just a copy of that commitment letter. Generally, what we see is applicants that are committing the funds themselves. We look for a copy of their audited financials, or a copy of an account statement showing that they have the cash available to commit that level of funding. If you were to obtain a Penvest loan down the road or another grant down the road, keeping in mind that there's a pretty tight timeline in terms of infrastructure, we can easily substitute that for match. But we are looking for that secured source of funds so that we have some level of confidence that that project's going to be completed if we approve the requested amount of funding.
That makes sense to me. All right. Under previous PA small water and sewer grants, we've utilized our existing sanitary sewer maintenance contracts, which utilize prevailing wages to perform the work. Is there a requirement that a project must be bid separately, or can we continue using those existing contracts? Or is that a conversation we have to have?
I think that might be a conversation, and that may be an instance where we actually have to encourage the applicant to discuss that with their solicitor, because as these are federal funds, they are required to comply with federal procurement guidelines. So I don't have an answer for that right now, but would be happy to have a conversation.
Sure. Can an applicant take action to award bids for the project prior to when award announcements are expected?
So I'm just going to reiterate that might be a conversation we want to have prior to your submission. If it's something where bids are being awarded and those contractors are okay with not executing a contract until after approval, great. But the environment for getting construction contractors is very competitive right now. I'm sure everyone is well aware of the price increases we've seen over the past few years, as well as the lack of availability of contractors, because there's been this level of public investment. So if you can find a contractor that's willing to wait with you, great. If not, either try to hold off or reach out to us to have that conversation.
So is it possible then to use our road crew, I'm going to assume this is a municipality, road crew, to do some of the work so that it does not need to be engineered, bid out separately?
Municipalities and municipal authorities are able to use their own crews in order to do a portion or all of the work. But I want to point out that because it is not a third-party contract or an arm's length transaction, it is not something we will be able to reimburse or include as part of the matching funds.
Okay. Are grants eligible for backup power supply for pump stations? Can that be a standalone project, or would it have to be part of a larger project? Is that an eligible cost?
It is eligible as a standalone project. However, if you look at our evaluation criteria, it may be something that might be a little more competitive if it's part of a larger project, but that is up to the individual applicant to determine how best they want to approach that.
And even though I love this person, they even said, even though we answered it before, they just want to clarify, inspection during construction is its own line item and does not count towards the 10% engineering.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
speaking
and
as a
I'll
previous
further
analyst,
clarify
make
that.
sure that it's clear in your invoices. So
Yeah.
don't have it say engineering, make sure it's clear.
Yeah, and just to further clarify that, so the 10% engineering is if you have a $1 million grant, we're not going to pay you more than $100,000 towards engineering. So if you have 120,000 of engineering costs, maximum we can pay is 100,000. That additional 20,000 in engineering would go towards the matching funds.
Wonderful, thank you. So there's a question about the grant guidelines on the website say that the small water and sewer program is limited to projects with a total cost below $500,000 rather than a max grant of $500,000 for small projects. But are larger projects eligible for this program? So are projects eligible for the program that are over $500,000? And does that mean small projects are going to have to compete with large projects? So if you can speak a little bit to the cost difference, maybe?
So I will say the legislation was updated in 2019 to allow for applicants to apply for a grant of up to $500,000. As far as will smaller projects need to compete with larger projects? To a certain extent, yes, but we're not looking at the number of connections or households that are going to be served by a project necessarily. So as far as does a larger project have an advantage over a smaller project, it depends how they line up in all of the other areas of evaluation.
Okay. Regarding the match, is it just for the project or does it include all costs, including engineering, permits, admin?
So
So is it just for construction or is it for all costs?
it's for all costs. So when you're submitting these applications, you have a cost estimate. That is your basis for the budget that you're preparing in the electronic single application. So for the PA Small Water and Sewer Program, no more than 85% of that total project cost can be in the small water and sewer column. Everything else would have to be in the match column. And with the H2O PA program, we're looking for no more than 2/3 of the project cost to be in the grant column versus 1/3 in the match column.
Okay. With this being federal funds, is the Single Audit Act applicable here?
You know, I should have known that question was going to be asked. And I believe the answer is yes. We have some information on it in our guidelines, and I'm just pulling them up here. So what we have listed in the guidelines, and I apologize because it's been a while since I looked through the requirements regarding the audit, but a recipient or subrecipient that expends $750,000 or more in federal awards during its fiscal year is required to provide the appropriate single or program-specific audit in accordance with the provisions outlined in the federal guidance.
Mandy Book has given an emphatic yes in the chat, so I'm assuming that's to that question.
Thanks, Mandy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mandy. So is this a grant opportunity available every year? Is this a one-time opportunity?
This program, so we were appropriated funds as part of the budget process. These are some of the state remaining state funds of their ARPA dollars that are being specifically designated for water and sewer infrastructure. Since the ARPA funds have to be obligated by the end of 2024, we're not quite sure whether or not there's going to be another round of COVID-19 ARPA funding, but we have had multiple rounds of both the H2O PA program and PA Small Water and Sewer program in the past. So there's a large need for infrastructure improvement funding across the Commonwealth, and as long as that continues to be the case, I would assume that there are going to be other opportunities in the future. I just don't know if they're going to be sourced with ARPA funds.
Okay. Are energy efficiency upgrades to a sewer treatment plant eligible if it's fixed equipment?
They are, and the emphasis there being on fixed equipment. That is under one of the expenditure categories, 5.7 for energy conservation.
Along that line with eligibility, would flow monitoring installation projects to evaluate inflow and infiltration into old sewer systems be considered eligible?
Again, I would have to say if it's part of a larger project, because that, to me, that sounds like it could be a pre-construction project.
And I'll say too, if you have questions on is this eligible, reaching out to Greg's office is a wonderful thing to do because they'll very easily be able to talk to you and figure that out. With the federal procurement requirements applying to the engineering portion of the project, or can awardees continue to contract with their designated engineer?
I would consult the federal guidance on that. this is our first round with federal funds, so we're by no means experts on it. But I can certainly look that up, and if somebody wants to reach out to me on that question, I'm more than happy to follow up on that one.
Okay. So with permits, do all of the permits have to be issued prior to application?
Great question. As part of the submission of the application, at a minimum, we require a list of all the permits that are going to be required in order to complete the project. Applicants that are able to provide copies of the permits that are secured, and if they've secured all of their permits prior to applying, that's going to be a project that fares a lot better in the project readiness category of our evaluation. That's not to say that projects that don't have permits can't obtain funding, because that's just one area of evaluation. But that is an instance where an applicant can strengthen their application if they have those permits in hand.
So it looks like I have like 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll be at our time. What is the level of planning commission review required, and does it need to be both local and county?
So we state specifically that we're just looking for a letter from the appropriate planning agency. So if your plans are administered at the local level, a local letter will be sufficient. If it's at the county level is what we're going to ask you for.
Wonderful. Does previous grant award under the Small Water Sewer Program impact eligibility for this round?
It does not.
And what is, someone asked specifically if they could use a cost estimate from February of 2022. And if it includes a 15% contingency, can they just cross it out and make it 5%? So I would say, how old is a cost estimate that's going to still be eligible for review?
Generally we're looking for a recent cost estimate. February 2022 is pretty borderline, especially when you consider the rate of inflation that we've seen across all sectors. So it probably would be a better idea to get an updated estimate, so that way you're not selling yourself short on what you're eligible to apply for.
But they could just cross out the 15% and figure out the 5% for contingency, right? Because the analyst is just
if you have a recent estimate that has 15 instead of 5, you can make that manual adjustment.
All right, wonderful. I believe that is most of our questions. There may be a few additional questions that people have, but we are at our time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So Ashley, thank you. Just posted again the contact information in the chat. And as we said previously, we will be sure to have this uploaded to our website within about a week or so. We do have a little bit of work we have to do beforehand. So we appreciate your participation and your questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our site development office. And thank you so much for attending today's session.